November 4th, 1944. A rancher in Kalispell, Montana, looks up at the sky and freezes. 30,000 feet above him floats a massive sphere, 70 feet wide, silent, drifting across American airspace. He's not alone. That same day, reports flood military installations across the West: Oregon, Wyoming, Washington, California. Dozens of enormous balloons appearing from nowhere. The War Department knows exactly what they are, and they're terrified. Japan has just launched the world's first intercontinental weapon system. 9,000 hydrogen balloons, each carrying bombs, riding the jet stream 5,000 miles across the Pacific to strike the American mainland. Their mission: set western forests ablaze, cripple the timber industry building American ships and planes, force America to divert resources from the Pacific War to defend the homeland. The U.S. military had one rapid response option left: paratroopers it trained but refused to deploy overseas. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, the Triple Nickels, first black paratroopers in American history. They wouldn't jump into France, they would jump into fire. While America fights Japan across the Pacific and Germany across Europe, these men will fight a third war on American soil against an enemy weapon the public won't know exists for decades. This is Operation Firefly, the most secret mission of World War II. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and let me know where you are. This is the story of the 555th. The black soldiers who became America's primary rapid response force against balloon-sparked fires. If you want World War II stories where elite soldiers fight wars nobody knew about, subscribe right now. We're documenting 150 forgotten stories from the black perspective. This is Operation Firefly, and it starts with men who had to prove they deserved to wear jump wings at all. Fort Benning, Georgia, December 1943. The U.S. Army Airborne Forces were whites only, by design. The official reasoning? Paratrooper training was too demanding. Black soldiers lacked the capacity for airborne operations. This was typed policy, filed in War Department offices. First Sergeant Walter Morris refused to accept it. He'd been writing letters since 1942, pressing commanders, filing requests, refusing to take no for an answer. In late 1943, the Army, under pressure from civil rights organizations and desperate for manpower, finally said yes. Not because they believed black men could do it, because they wanted to prove they couldn't. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion was activated December 30th, 1943. 20 officers, mostly white. 400 enlisted men, all black. From day one, every man knew the truth. They were being set up to fail. The training standards for white paratroopers: rigorous. The standards for the 555th: impossible. Every test harder. Every inspection stricter. Any infraction could mean dismissal. If the 555th failed, the Army would shut down the experiment and use it as proof. The pressure wasn't just on these men. It was on every black soldier who would come after them. Jump training. 5 jumps to earn your wings. For white paratroopers, the atmosphere was intense but supportive. For the 555th, every jump was surveillance. White officers with clipboards. White paratroopers watching, some hoping they'd fail. The town of Columbus, Georgia, made it clear these men weren't welcome. Restaurants refused service, buses were segregated, they were training to jump out of airplanes for their country, and they couldn't sit at a lunch counter. But here's what happened. Jump 1, every man jumped. Jump 2, every man jumped. Jumps 3, 4, 5, every single man jumped. The 555th had a training completion rate higher than most white airborne units. They exceeded every standard. Not one man failed jump training. February 1944. The 555th earned their jump wings. Airborne qualified. Officially paratroopers, and they waited for combat deployment orders. D-Day planning was in full swing. The 82nd Airborne was preparing. The 101st Airborne was preparing. June 6, 1944. D-Day. White paratrooper units dropped into Normandy. The 555th watched from Georgia. July, August, September. No deployment orders. They'd proven they could do the job, but the army wouldn't send them to Europe. Sending black paratroopers overseas meant dealing with the race problem in combat zones. Easier to keep them stateside. The most highly trained paratrooper unit that would never see combat. That's what they thought. But in late 1944, something was happening on the West Coast that would change everything. Japan was attacking the American homeland. Ichinomiya, Japan, November 1944. A balloon, 70 feet wide, made of laminated mulberry paper glued by hand, mostly by schoolgirls in factories, fingers bleeding from tedious work. Attached to it, a chandelier of destruction, 36 sandbags for ballast, one 33-pound anti-personnel bomb, 2 incendiary bombs designed to start fires, and an altimeter that automatically dropped sandbags to maintain altitude at 30,000 feet, cruising near the ceiling where detection and interception were difficult in 1944. This is the Fugo balloon bomb, Japan's secret weapon. Japanese meteorologists had discovered the jet stream, a river of air flowing from Japan to North America at 30,000 feet, moving up to 200 miles per hour. Launch a balloon into this current, and in 3 days it crosses 5,000 miles of ocean. No ships, no planes, no radar detection, just hydrogen balloons riding the wind. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan would launch 9,000 of them. The targets weren't cities, the targets were forests. The Pacific Northwest held the largest timber reserves in the world. Wood-building American ships, planes, barracks. One bomb starting one forest fire might burn thousands of acres. 100 fires simultaneously would overwhelm firefighting resources. Timber production would collapse. Civilian morale would crater. The first balloons launched in November. Within days, they reached North America. Reports flooded in. What were these enormous balloons? Where were they coming from? The US military knew immediately, and they faced a crisis. These balloons were reaching the mainland. Some bombs were detonating. It was only a matter of time before one hit a populated area or started a catastrophic fire. Then came the worst realization. Japan didn't know if their balloons were working, no way to observe results, which meant the worst thing America could do was publicize the threat. If newspapers reported balloon bombs, that information might reach Japan. They'd know their weapon system was working. The US government made a decision: complete censorship. The Office of Censorship sent directives to every media outlet. Do not report balloon bombs. Nothing. Total blackout. It was one of the most successful censorship operations of the war. Hundreds of balloon bombs landed, and the American public knew nothing. But the problem remained. Japanese balloon bombs were reaching American soil. Forest fires needed to be suppressed quickly. The most critical problem: if a balloon bomb started a fire in remote wilderness, how do you get firefighters there before it spreads? Roads might not exist. Hiking could take days. The solution: parachute firefighters, smoke jumpers who could deploy to remote fires within hours. In early 1945, military command had a problem and a solution in the same place. The problem: balloon bombs threatening forests. The solution: a battalion of trained paratroopers at Fort Benning with no assignment. The 555th was about to get their mission in American forests, against an enemy weapon most Americans would never know existed. May 1945. Pendleton Army Airfield, Oregon. The 555th arrived in the Pacific Northwest. After 18 months of training, after proving themselves repeatedly, they finally had a mission. It wasn't what they'd hoped for, but it was a mission. Operation Firefly. smoke jumping to suppress fires caused by Japanese balloon bombs. The 555th would be the primary response force, jumping into remote wilderness to contain fires before they spread. The mission briefing was classified. The men learned what the public didn't know. Japan was attacking the mainland. Hundreds of balloons had landed. More were coming. When a fire was spotted that might be balloon bomb caused, they'd deploy within hours. Jumps into remote wilderness, mountains, dense forests, areas with no roads. They'd parachute in with firefighting tools, suppress the fire, then hike out through miles of wilderness. It was more dangerous than combat jumping. Combat paratroopers jumped into relatively clear drop zones with units nearby. Smoke jumpers jumped into forests, trees, rocks, cliffs, unknown terrain. Completely isolated with no backup. The 555th needed additional training. They learned firefighting techniques, digging fire breaks, using hand tools to suppress flames, reading fire behavior. They learned tree landing and extraction, parachuting into forest canopy, securing yourself, rappelling down. They learned wilderness survival. The training was compressed, weeks, not months. White smoke jumpers had years of experience. The 555th had to match that expertise immediately. They trained in mountains and forests around Pendleton, practiced jumps into forested areas, learning to avoid trees when possible, land in them when unavoidable, extract from tangled parachutes 100 feet up. They practiced with Pulaski tools, shovels, crosscut saws. If you're learning about World War II missions where the front line was right here at home, subscribe now. We're documenting 150 forgotten stories where black soldiers did jobs nobody else could do. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. The 555th approached this like paratrooper training, determined to excel. They learned faster than expected. Within weeks, certified ready. Then the fires started. Between May and September 1945, the 555th conducted over 1,000 individual fire jumps across Oregon, Washington, Northern California, Idaho, and Montana. Dozens of fires contained, fire spotted, jump team assembled, typically 4 to 8 men, aircraft dispatched, flight to fire location, jump over fire, land, extract from trees, assemble equipment, begin firefighting. The work was brutal. Digging fire breaks through roots and rocks for hours, suppressing flames, getting close enough to feel heat-searing skin, smoke choking. Many developed respiratory problems. Terrain treacherous, steep slopes, loose rock, hidden cliffs. 3 missions show what they faced. Fremont National Forest, Oregon. Balloon bomb ignited fire in dense timber. 555th jumped within hours. Contained at 80 acres. Without rapid response, thousands of acres could have burned. Cascade Mountains, Washington. Fire in timber so dry, Forest Services said uncontrollable. 555th jumped anyway. Worked 3 days straight. Contained it. Idaho Wilderness. Fire spreading toward Lumbertown. 555th jumped between fire and town. Dug fire breaks for 16 hours. Town saved. Fire after fire. Jump after jump. The 555th became the primary firefighting force across the Northwest. Faster than ground crews, more mobile than traditional firefighters, more effective in remote locations. Injuries were regular. Broken bones from rough landings, cuts from tree branches, rope burns from rappelling, burns from fighting fires. Several died, parachute malfunctions, landing injuries, fires spreading too fast. Memorial records indicate at least a dozen deaths during summer 1945. The men understood the risks. They jumped anyway, because the mission mattered, because forests needed saving, because they were soldiers. By August, Operation Firefly had become one of the most successful firefighting operations in American history. Dozens of catastrophic fires prevented, timber resources protected, over 1,000 individual fire jumps, dozens of fires contained, a doctrine born in smoke and silence. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The balloon bomb threat ended. But Operation Firefly continued through September. Natural fires still needed fighting. When the operation concluded, the 555th had created modern smoke-jumping doctrine that the U.S. Forest Service still uses today. Rapid deployment, aggressive initial attack, small teams in remote locations. And they'd done it while the American public knew nothing about the threat or the soldiers defending against it. May 5th, 1945. While the 555th trained for Operation Firefly, tragedy struck that demonstrated exactly why their mission mattered. Reverend Archie Mitchell and his wife Elsie, 5 months pregnant, took 5 children from their church on a fishing trip near Bly, Oregon. Beautiful spring day. The war in Europe was nearly over. Oregon felt safe. Reverend Mitchell was parking when his wife and the children walked into the woods. Moments later, Elsie called out, "Look what I found, dear." She'd spotted something unusual, a large object partially buried with some mechanism attached, a Fugo balloon bomb, unexploded. Both incendiary devices and anti-personnel bombs still armed. Someone touched it. The bomb detonated. Elsie Mitchell, 5 months pregnant, killed instantly. 5 children, Edward Engen, 13, Jay Gifford, 13, Joan Patsky, 13, Dick Patsky, 14, Sherman Shoemaker, 11, killed instantly. Bly, Oregon, May 5, 1945. 6 lives lost. The only confirmed fatalities from enemy action in the continental United States. Reverend Mitchell survived because he was at the car. He heard the explosion, ran into the woods, found his wife and 5 children dead. Military and authorities arrived within hours, identified the bomb as Fugo. Then came the decision about what to tell the public. The Office of Censorship Directive was still in effect. Local newspapers reported 6 people died in an explosion. No specifics, no mention of balloons, no mention of Japanese weapons, just explosion. National newspapers didn't cover it, treated as local tragedy. Censorship held. Most Americans never learned about Bly during the war, but the military knew. If a balloon bomb could kill 6 civilians in Oregon, what if one landed near a school or started a fire consuming a town? The threat was more severe than realized. This made Operation Firefly critical. The 555th wasn't just protecting timber, they were protecting civilian lives. Every fire suppressed quickly was one less chance of catastrophe. The men of the 555th learned about Bly in classified briefings. They understood the stakes. Every fire jump carried that weight. Somewhere might be more unexploded balloons, civilians at risk from weapons they didn't know existed. The Bly incident remained largely unknown until after surrender, when censorship was lifted in late May 1945. Even then, reported as historical footnote. The broader Fugo story remained obscure. For decades, the Bly victims were forgotten casualties. They didn't fit the narrative of war as distant conflict, so they were omitted from historical memory. The 555th knew better. They'd fought that threat all summer. They knew Fugo had been real. They knew Operation Firefly had been critical defense. They knew they'd saved lives, and they knew both threat and response had been kept secret from the nation they served. September 1945. The 555th completed their final fire jump, mission over. They'd accomplished everything asked and more. They expected recognition, unit citations, medals, acknowledgement they'd executed one of the most unique operations of the war. They expected the Army to publicize their achievement. None of that happened. No unit citation, no individual medals. After-action reports filed in classified archives. Official histories barely mentioned the 555th. The pattern is familiar. Recognizing the 555th's success would undermine justification for continued segregation. The Army wanted to maintain the position that black soldiers were less capable. The 555th had demonstrated quick decision-making, physical endurance, technical skill. Highlighting their achievement would contradict the rationale for keeping airborne forces segregated. The Fugo campaign remained classified until 1950. Even after declassification, presented as minor curiosity, interesting Japanese failure, not serious threat. Operation Firefly barely mentioned. Easier to minimize the story. File the reports. Don't publicize. Let the 555th's operations fade into obscurity. The soldiers understood what happened. They'd proven themselves as paratroopers. They'd proven themselves as smokejumpers. Over 1,000 fire jumps, more than most combat paratroopers made during the entire war. They'd fought fires under conditions more dangerous than many combat operations. They'd saved forests, resources, lives, and the nation gave them a handshake, discharge papers, and silence. The 555th was deactivated December 1947. Men returned to civilian life in still segregated America. They couldn't talk about their service because much remained classified. They couldn't point to medals because none were awarded. They couldn't show newspaper clippings because the operation had been secret. Some used the GI Bill, facing discrimination in housing and education. Some returned to pre-war jobs with same limited opportunities. Some struggled with injuries, respiratory problems from smoke, joint damage from landings, back injuries from carrying equipment. For decades, the 555 story remained buried, not taught in military academies, not included in airborne histories, not featured in documentaries. Almost nobody knew. Then, beginning in the 1990s, historians researching black military service found references to the 555 and Operation Firefly. Unit records existed in archives. After-action reports documented their jumps. Some veterans were interviewed. The documentation had been there all along, but nobody had looked, or if they looked, didn't consider it significant. What emerged was remarkable. The 555th had essentially created modern smoke jumping. The techniques they developed, rapid deployment, parachuting into forests, aggressive initial attack, became standard practice for U.S. Forest Service. Modern smoke jumpers trace doctrine directly to what the 555 proved possible in 1945. The 555 had proven black soldiers could master one of the most demanding military specialties. They'd adapted that training to entirely different mission. They'd operated effectively in extremely dangerous conditions. Everything the Army said black soldiers couldn't do, the 555 did, exceptionally well. Today, the 555th is beginning to receive recognition. Surviving members were later honored by Congress, one of the highest civilian honors. Military historians cite the 555th as pioneers. Museums include extensive exhibits. Educational materials teach their achievements. But recognition came too late for most. The soldiers who jumped into fires lived most of their lives seeing no acknowledgement. They knew. Their brothers who jumped beside them knew. But the nation didn't acknowledge it until most were gone. The 555th story teaches critical lessons. Barrier breaking isn't just about being allowed to try. It's about succeeding under conditions designed to make you fail, then having success minimized or ignored. Technical excellence has no color. Secret missions sometimes stay secret for wrong reasons. Institutional racism doesn't just deny opportunity, it denies recognition for undeniable achievements. In 1943, the Army said black men couldn't be paratroopers. The 555th proved them wrong. In 1945, Japan attacked the mainland with 9,000 fire bombs. The 555th jumped into fires over 1,000 times and stopped that attack. They created modern smoke jumping. They saved forests, resources, lives. They served with excellence in a mission most Americans would never know existed. And for 60 years, almost nobody knew their names. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, the Triple Nickels, held the line against invisible enemy on American soil. They jumped into danger most can't imagine. They succeeded where failure meant catastrophe. And they did it while facing discrimination from the nation they were defending. The 555th jumped into fires so America's forests wouldn't burn. We're jumping into forgotten history, so their story won't be buried. If you want the 150 overlooked World War II stories where black soldiers achieved the impossible and got no credit, subscribe now. Comment where you're watching from and which unit we should document next. The 555th held the line. We're holding the line on their memory.